Lovely, beautiful Sunday before Christmas. Awake and ready. I can see that this Christmas will be a wonderful one for each and every one of us, especially those of us in CSA. Yesterday, we started with an all-day meditation, and those who were blessed to come, I saw a lot of people around, including our leader, Reverend Auntie Peace. Okay, back to today's lesson sermon. It is entitled, or the title is Living in the Master Consciousness. Living in the Master Consciousness. Roy writes that our goal on the spiritual path is to come to the place where we actually live in the Master Consciousness, in God consciousness at all times. You know, very shortly, it will be end of the year, and you'll be writing down your goals for 2026. I would honestly wish or sincerely wish that each and every one of us will write for our goal in 2026 to live from an elevated state of consciousness, to live from an elevated state of consciousness. And this is how it is done. So many on the spiritual path are thinking in terms of God and themselves instead of God expressing as themselves. We see this in their attitudes, their efforts to solve problems, change conditions, etc., through prayer and by expecting God to do things for them. What they must learn to do is to take a stand and remain firm in the realization that God is expressing as all life right now. In fact, those of us who have been coming to the Tuesday and Thursday classes, Reverend Samuel Sasu has taught us a way of praying. He says, or affirming, he says, God in me can bring about change. God in me can bring about health. He says, when you pray like that, anything after God in me cannot be negative. You cannot say anything negative about after that. So God in me can bring about health. This is the way to fulfillment. In this consciousness, there is no belief in lack, limitation, or problems. Think about this. In the early stages, we learn to pray scientifically and to think straight. We learn that according to the laws of mind, whatever image we hold in our mind tends to come into manifestation. I think for most of us on the spiritual path, these are things we learned long ago. Now we know that these are facts, that anything you hold in your mind and believe and sincerely desire to pass will come to pass. Because our mind is a portion of cosmic mind and is in tune with it. Then, as we advance, we learn to give up selfishness and let divine intelligence lead us in all things and circumstances. We should eventually come to the place where we never see any human need for ourselves. Life should be a steady outpouring from within. In this way, we live by grace, doing the will of the Father. Remember the words of Jesus, not my will, but thy will, O Father. When we are established in God consciousness, and here let me remind each and every one of us about the Kriya Yoga path. What is Kriya Yoga? In chapter 2 of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, it states, intensive self-discipline, studious self-enquiry, and surrender to God are the practices of Kriya Yoga. I repeat, intensive self-discipline, studious self-enquiry, and surrender to God are the practices of Kriya Yoga. Roy's commentary is mastery of attention, mental states, emotions, sense edges, and behaviors frees mind and awareness from conditions which confine and restrict it. Mastery of attention, mental states, emotions, sense edges, and behaviors, frees mind and awareness from conditions which confine and restrict it. Insightful study of higher realities provides knowledge of our true nature, the reality of God and cosmic processes. To live effectively, knowledge of the laws of cause and effect that determine events and circumstances in the mundane realm should also be acquired. Surrender of the illusional sense of self identity to God is accomplished by nurturing devotion to the ideal of being self and God realized. That's what we are talking about. Surrender of the illusional sense of self identity to God is accomplished by nurturing devotion to the ideal of being self and God realized. That culminates in transcendence of ego consciousness. Attention and awareness are then unified with supreme consciousness. He goes on to state, Kriyas are intentional actions which nurture personal well-being, emotional maturity, and spiritual growth. Intentional actions. I think this is something which some time ago our leader and Reverend Antipeace preached on intentional actions. All our actions should be intentional. Let us eschew or subconscious actions, but let us be intentional in what we do. When we are established in God consciousness, which is our proper condition, if a shadow looms on the horizon, a threat of discord, a problem, etc., we have only to speak the word and the problem is dissolved. Isn't that wonderful? That when anything comes into our lives or on the horizon, all we have to do is turn within, acknowledge the presence of God within, and then speak the word, and then the problem is dissolved. It should be that simple. No effort, no supplication, no mental straining, no making deals with God. Just a simple acceptance that perfection is the law of our lives. In our early years, we make efforts because we do not see clearly. We gradually awaken, learn, and recognize the truth about life. From this, we acknowledge that we mustn't stay at the same level forever. When we were children, we played with counters and all that. Now we are adults. And so we have to gradually awaken, learn, and recognize the truth about life. On the spiritual path, too, we also have to make progress and not be on the same level forever. But once we are established in God consciousness, the struggle is over and the delusion is banished. Can you imagine Jesus, Buddha, Krishna, or any other master living in lack or limitation? Of course not. Well, you too are a master. You have always been at the soul level, God conscious. Now you are transformed because of the renewing of your mind, and you are rich in the things of God, and fulfillment is the natural law of your life. How could it be otherwise? Read the accounts of the life of Jesus in the New Testament. Read of the other enlightened men and women and become attuned to their way of thinking and their way of reacting to situations. I remember that Reverend Samuel Sasu told us long ago that he stopped working in the complaints department of life. Now he works in the solutions department of life. So read of the accounts of the life of Jesus of the New Testament, read of other enlightened men and women, and become attuned to their way of thinking and their way of reacting to situations. See how easily they handle the things of the world, how relaxed and natural it was for them. I'm sure each and every one of us has, at one time or the other, consulted Reverend Sasu on a problem. Can't we see how easily he goes about it? He does not fret. He does not say, "Oh, God, as for this one, they are so great." He relaxes and says, turns within and say, it will be well. So let us do that also. This is our example. Of course, like the masters, we too will have to get away from the pressures of the life of the world from time to time in order to become settled and firmly anchored in the awareness of our true nature. As long as we live in the world, we tend to subconsciously pick up the thoughts and feelings of others around us. That is why we need to meditate daily and remain in tune. He says that from time to time, in order to become, we will have to get away from the pressures of the world. So now that all day meditation, as Reverend said, will now be reintroduced, we will also beg him that some time ago, those of us who are old members will remember that we used to go on retreats. And if it is possible, maybe we can schedule a retreat for 2026 so that we can go away from the pressures of the world and be renewed in our thinking and our feeling and our actions. Reverend, so over to you. Once we reach a certain level of realization, the effort to attain is removed. From then on, we just continue to gain deeper and deeper insights. It is a natural process. Once you reach a certain level of realization, the effort to attain is removed. Here too, a few people come to mind. Our leader, Reverend Antipas, Reverend Hammond, and Reverend the Abraham, that they just continue, the effort to attain is removed. And then they continue to give us deeper and deeper insights from their level of realization. It is a natural process and one without effort, but we do not need to keep our consciousness clear so that, but sorry, we do need to keep our consciousness clear so that we do not identify with the old ways of thinking and believing. We become like that when we contemplate. If we see and think about and believe in misery and limitation, if we see and think about that and believe in misery and limitation, before long, we will again identify with it and be in bondage. If we keep our attention flowing to the source, if we rely on God at all times and in all situations, then we are on the right track. So he's telling us the secret is always to live from an elevated point of view, an elevated state of consciousness. And I don't think it is difficult to do because we can see all around us that there are examples apart from Reverend Samuel Sasu, Reverend Techi, and all the people. All of us are trying our best to live from an elevated point of view. Masters are not limited. Masters are not limited. Sometimes, while dealing with people, they may seem to be human and limited, but inwardly, they are always aware of who they are and the role they are playing. Inwardly, they are always aware of who they are and the role they are playing. A master can be all things to all men, that some might be saved. While outwardly conforming, a master inwardly remains non involved and free. This is the secret of attainment. A master is the supreme renunciate because he has renounced any belief that there is anything that is not of God. He sees only the divine life in infinite expression, and he consciously cooperates with the divine will. A master translates all distorted appearances by seeing through the shadows to that which is real. If you don't believe me or you don't believe Roy, please bring your problem to Reverend Sasu and then observe how he will deal with it. A master knows that he is in the Father and the Father is in him. He knows that as a soul, he is a ray of light, a specialized expression of spirit. He knows that he is not a body, a mind or a body, but that he works through mind and body. He's not a conditioned, karma-bound soul. He is free. Remember, where the presence of God or where the Spirit of God is, there is liberty, there is freedom. So let that Spirit of God or that elevated God consciousness be with you at all times, not sometimes, at all times. Remember intentional living. A master is ever aware that all things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. In other words, a master sees everything in creation as a manifestation of consciousness. Gross consciousness came out of and is sustained by pure consciousness. Because of the pure vision, because of the pure vision, this vision which does not behold evil, the master is a light to the world. He has removed himself through God's grace from and the grace of the Guru from the restricting influence of Maya, the darkness or fabric of nature. He is therefore in a position to show others the way out of darkness, both by example and precept. Such a one is literally the way, the truth, and the life. Then he goes on to say that the ordinary man is a self imprisoned master. The average person limits himself by affirming and believing himself to be bound as a result of karma, lack of intelligence, sin, and so on. By so doing, he does himself a serious disservice. Of course, merely to affirm that we are masters would not make it so in the twinkling of an eye, but to daily contemplate our true nature will result in our eventual awakening to the truth. Not only that, remember to practice Kriya Yoga. And I've just read what Kriya Yoga is all about: self discipline, studious self inquiry, and surrender to the higher power, which is our eternal God. Of course, merely to affirm that we are masters will not make it so in the twinkling of an eye, but to daily contemplate our true nature will result in our eventual awakening to the truth. The distance is not to travel too far. The difference between the average man's consciousness and a master's consciousness is not great. The only difference is the master has a clear consciousness, free of distortions and free of guilt, regret, envy, resentment, negative thoughts and feelings, etc. A master also recognizes himself to be a son of God. A deluded person is a son of God. And it is this that must be raised up if man is to know himself as a spiritual being. We are all children of God. And so, as children of God, we know that each and every one has the ability to turn his life around and know the truth about himself and his world. Gradually, we are transformed by the light and power of God, our real nature working through us. In time, night is turned into day and the old concepts are banished. We rise above the belief in birth and death, and we know the truth that we are immortal and superior to all outer appearances. A master living in this world in truth lives in heaven. A master, sorry, living in this world in truth lives in heaven, the world of reality, the consciousness of fulfillment and right action. That is the difference between a master and the ordinary person. At the same time, others around him live in various degrees of darkness. Some are confused, others problem centered, and still others are living in hell, a condition of torment and pain. But the truth is that heaven is right here, right now. It is not a future time fulfillment. Heaven is right here, right now, for those who can see it. The way to see heaven is to clear the mind and to release everything which is not of the master consciousness. Whenever you have a thought or feeling which is not consistent with the master consciousness, release it. It is that simple. Replace fear with faith. Replace a sense of lack with a realization of abundance. Replace a sense of limitation with the knowledge of truth, creative expression. Overcome condemnation with forgiveness and guilt, regret and resentment. With release, replace pride with humility, ego with selflessness, belief in mortality with a realization and acceptance of eternal life, and all anxiety with peace of mind. Learn to know that God, the one life, is speaking through your lips or speaking through our lips, working through our hands, loving through our love, moving in through and as us at all times. Then whatever we do, if it is spontaneous and right for all concerned, it will be a spiritual activity. We will no longer have to try to be good because we will manifest goodness in self. Remember the prayer, God in me is goodness, God in me is health, God in me is perfect peace. The masters live always in the consciousness of God. I like that one. The masters live always in the consciousness of God. One great sage was asked how he entered Samadhi, the God conscious state, and he replied, when one knows oneself as God, there is no more entering in or going out. Consider the prayer of Jesus. Father, glorify thou me with thine own glory, with the glory I had with thee before the world was. This is our goal, to become aware of how it was with us in the beginning, how it really is with us now on a deeper level of our being. This is why we can take the advice to repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Heaven of fulfillment, the world of reality, the perfect realm, is here and now for the taking. It cannot be earned. Good works will not assure it as a reward. It is ours through God's grace. It is ours through God's grace and the Master's grace, or our Guru's grace as well. This means that the Master consciousness has only to be entered into and lived from. But there is a price. We must give up everything of a limited nature that stands in the way of our seeing and living the truth. The price we have to pay for trying to be in the master consciousness is to give up everything of a limited nature that stands in the way of our seeing and living the truth. Okay, now there's an affirmation. So I'll read it and then we affirm it. Moment to moment, I live in the awareness of my God nature. I move through the shadows of the world freely, without involvement or reaction, doing only the will of the divine. Okay, so now let us repeat the affirmation. Moment to moment, I live in the awareness of my God nature. I move through the shadows of the world freely, without involvement or reaction. Involvement or reaction. Doing only the will of the divine. Again, moment to moment, I live in the awareness of my God nature. I move through the shadows of the world freely, without involvement or reaction, doing only the will of the divine. And for the last time, moment to moment, I live in the awareness of my God nature. I move through the shadows of the world freely, without involvement or reaction, doing only the will of the divine. Thank you so much. Amen.